Okay, good morning. This is Zach Culver at the Kentucky Employee Assistance Program. Let's go ahead and get started with today's webinar. As I mentioned before, we are in presentation mode only, so all of the microphones are muted. If you need to ask any questions, go ahead and type them into the chat box. I'm going to wait till the end, though, to hit those. It's a lot of information to get through. And you'll also have my contact info for employee assistance, so you can reach out afterwards. We're also keeping all of the videos off, except for our American Sign Language interpreter. And let's go ahead and get started. So this is a presentation from KEAP, the Kentucky Employee Assistance Program. And during this really difficult time of COVID, we've worked to provide more resources through our website. Anxiety issues related to illness, meditation resources that we've recorded and provided. We developed a workshop looking at the difficulties with isolation and telecommuting. That has also been added as a part of our presentations. And we started talking about whether or not this late in the game, providing something for folks working at home with kids would be attended. At the very least, I figured putting something together would give me some information that I could use for those folks calling the KEAP office directly. And we put this together and set it out to see if anybody would bite. And we found out that we had to create a second one, which is this one today, to cover the overflow from the first one. So this is still obviously a relevant issue. I mentioned that I saw this as an opportunity to learn myself because I, like you, are working from home with children. In addition to working at KEAP, I have a private practice on the side in Louisville. I have a 14-year-old that just started high school, an 11-year-old that just started middle school, and a 6-year-old that's in kindergarten. In addition, I have a 95-year-old grandmother who still gets around. But she needs a lot of support, and that comes from yours truly because all of their family are up in the Northeast. Now, I'm not telling you this in order to get a bunch of accolades. I'm just trying to legitimize my role in being the presenter for today's webinar, and that I understand what you all are going through. Now, with that said, we also have to acknowledge that everyone may share the situation of working at home with kids, but our work responsibilities and environments and kids are going to be very different. I'm going to try to cover a wide range of things today. And I think one of the real benefits of this webinar, in addition to the handout, which I think has a treasure trove of resources that I'll refer to, is that this starts the conversation and reminds you that KEAP is here to support you as you attempt to implement this stuff moving forward. So my goal is talking about language, resources, some ideas that you can apply, but with the ongoing idea that you can reach out to us to tailor some of the things we talk about to your specific needs. So I gave you some info on me. Let's get some information about you all. I'm going to throw up a few quick polls here. And so this first one is, and you should see the choices on the screen. You can endorse more than one, of course, if you got more than one kiddo in a different age range. And this is going to give a sense of what we're looking at age-wise. Okay, wow. So it looks like, okay, got about 80% of the people have voted. Still some stuff coming in. Okay, well, in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and end it. We're at 85%. I'll end that and I'll share the results. So you see here, we got a good range of kiddos, the most being in the K through grade 5, which can be pretty challenging. Okay, and let's do another one here real quick. Just want to find out who has access to a smartphone. Okay, looks like the majority of folks. And then finally, how's our internet access? Do we have that at home? Or are we going somewhere else for that? Are we using family members? Because we can talk about some resources and some of the things that I'll mention today, other options if we don't have access to smartphones and internet. Okay. Okay. Again, the majority of folks there as well, but we'll, like I said, hit on a few things that might be available for those folks that don't have access to that technology. Alrighty. It has been a tough year, you all, right? It's human nature for us to focus on what we aren't getting right. That's negativity bias. In fact, there's been some research to suggest that we need 3 good things in order to overcome 1 bad thing. So if you're struggling these days to recognize what you are doing well or feeling negative about NTI, I want to first say that you are not educators, right? Unless you actually are. But I'd like to mention that one of the resources that I used for ideas was a teacher who had transitioned into administration and acknowledged that she at first felt embarrassed about her perceived lack of success until she provided herself with some grace to not be perfect and was more deliberate about highlighting what she had done well. So I want to kickstart today off by saying that if you're attempting to do a job and help get your kids educated, then you all are doing amazing work. If you have not got enough praise, then that is the foot that I want to start off from today. If you are here this morning, then you are invested in your family, and that goes a long way. If you're worried about what you're doing, that isn't necessarily an indication that you're failing, but instead proof that you care. Success and failure are not separate from each other. You cannot attain success without understanding what doesn't work. Teachers have practicums and mentors. They have lots of time to practice before jumping in. You didn't, right? So give yourself some grace. We need to accept our limitations of time and of having our attention divided. Sit down and reflect on whether your expectations for yourself and your household are realistic. Actually write them down. You might be surprised at how strict your expectations are once you really bring awareness to them. Unconscious narratives for ourselves, what we refer to as schemas in therapy, are developed through our lifetime and are based off of parental modeling, exposure to our colleagues' work performance, and that's supervisors and coworkers, and our own personal experiences, usually of a distressing nature, right? So success in making perfect dinners or keeping the house spotless or limiting screen time to pre-COVID levels or maintaining laser focus, among a whole host of other things, is not realistic. So don't compare yourself to what others are doing. They are not you. And what you see on social media are snippets of things that are done right, the person's best image. You aren't seeing what's going on all day and behind closed doors. Many of us are being asked to write down everything that we're doing throughout the workday, which makes people very subconscious, right? But we must remember we're not in an environment to recreate our workdays as we know them. We're seeing more meetings in order to stay connected. We're seeing more technology problems as we try to telecommute. And in retrospect, were we working 8 hours straight or 7.5 hours straight when we were in the office? Maybe some of us did, maybe some of us still do. But how much time went into speaking with coworkers or management as we could physically see everyone in the next cube or the next office? How much time did we spend walking to the copier or the file cabinet? Maybe we are even working more, and some studies show that working at home, people are working actually much harder. But recognizing that there's going to be gaps in performance that occur as we attempt to get a grip on chaos and deal with stress. Similarly, what is the realistic expectation for reproducing the school day, right, or the school week? Think of all the people that come into contact with your kiddos at school, all the extracurriculars that may be on hold. There's zero way for you to recreate that atmosphere, so stop trying. Like the workplace, the school day is not straight through. It's time in between classes. It's transitioning to different lessons. It's group work, which you probably can't reproduce. It's lunches. It's recess. It's teachers managing behavior. It's not consistent education. So once we can get to a place to recognize that they're not working straight through all the time, then maybe we can loosen up our expectations at home. And what about getting our kids up and following the usual schedule as if they're in school? Now, there's a real benefit to maintaining a schedule because it provides structure and hopefully helps the transition back to being smoother. However, it might not be realistic either, right? So letting my kids sleep in allows me time to get important work done first thing without distractions. It also allows my teen to get the 20 hours of sleep that they recommend for his age range. Okay, so maybe I'm exaggerating a bit, but they do need a lot of rest to deal with the significant increase in work as compared to middle school, and to deal with those hormones that result in the Jekyll and Hyde show I get on a daily basis. Structure is vital to success, but I would argue that the level of structure is dependent on your needs, the needs of your child, and the needs of the moment. Okay, so let's talk about how to start formulating the structure for your household. The perfect family. The first step is a family meeting, and I wanted this workshop because it's hopefully at the tail end of COVID. I wanted this workshop to incorporate concepts that are important and extend beyond the pandemic, right? So why is a family meeting important and something we should be doing even after COVID? Well, the family meeting helps build children's self-esteem by treating them like valued members whose ideas are listened to and considered. This also has the added benefit of getting buy-in for family members because everyone's input was part of the process and there was a verbal agreement everyone witnessed together. Children learn that family members are independent, that they're all connected, and what each person does has an effect on everyone else. Skill development such as compromise, openness to others' ideas, cooperation, all these will help kids better deal effectively with problems they encounter in other situations and social settings. The family becomes more cohesive, and that closeness increases because children are then more likely to identify with the family. As a result, hopefully children see themselves as having responsibility for making a good family life. By participating in family meetings, children learn to take the perspective of the whole group and to think of what is good for the family as a whole, not just themselves. So we're building empathy, right? And in addition, this helps to counterbalance the hectic lives that today's parents and children lead. I'm talking about technology distractions, extracurriculars, school and work pressures, which all may send family members in different directions. Doing this sends a message that family time is important and is a priority. And then finally, children learn to examine situations, propose solutions, and evaluate results with guidance and support from you and their older siblings. So how do we start the family meeting? Well, find whatever room that your Wi-Fi is in and unplug it, and then people will come a-running. Or the more adult way of going about it is to schedule something, and what I like to do on a weekly basis, right? So maybe a Sunday evening is a good day to do that in order to kind of talk about the following week. Now, if you have more complicated issues pop up, the nice thing about doing it weekly is that you're hopefully keeping it briefer. But if you have something more complicated pop up, maybe table that for a longer monthly chat. And again, I'm forward thinking and thinking about the positive because I am a therapist. Maybe once we get past COVID and we can go out to maybe Malibu Jacks or something like that, have dinner, do a little fun, and then have our big family meeting, something to think about for the future. So start the discussion about the expectations for the week. What do your kids see as an agreeable amount of work between the live classes? How hands-on are you as it relates to schoolwork and grades? Do you look at their to-do lists on their Google Classroom, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute? Older kids want to be more independent, and that is important. especially when they transition to college and out of the home. We're trying to build self-reliance. And I think one of the best uses of this time, this family meeting time, is to discuss how to address any problems that have been occurring over the previous weeks. By framing the family meeting as a way to brainstorm and problem solve, then it becomes an environment of collaboration instead of a rehash of what everyone is doing wrong. And the language used here is very important. So instead of just saying to your partner, why did you let little Susie interrupt my staff meeting with Cheerios all over her face and naked from the waist down, you instead start by saying, there were some challenges maintaining everyone's need for uninterrupted time this week. How can we work on that, right? Now, usually the specifics about little Susie will come out organically, but we are starting off with an air of cooperation instead of finger pointing. And then the brainstorming sessions can begin, right? So I'm not going to go into specifics of brainstorming. I actually have a list of things on the handouts that kind of work you through different components of that. What I would like to say is brainstorming episodes are supposed to be judgment-free. You take the craziest ideas possible. You try to get as many in within a particular time period. Sometimes you might set a timer for a minute and then just write down as many things as you can. And then afterwards, you weed them out, you see what's more realistic, and then you can start actually developing some solutions. So structure, the importance of structure, or how I like to refer to it, I'm very, 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 very tired of thinking. There is such a thing as decision fatigue. In fact, the New York Times just recently did an article on it. But the idea here is that, with every decision that we make, we are using energy. Our brain works on energy. The more complicated the decision, the more frequency of decision making, the more energy is depleted. So we want to limit the amount of decision making that we're doing on the fly. So setting up structure is key to that. You know how you've heard that most people don't like change? Well, I can back that up with my experience working with people in the mental health field. And that's because change takes us away from what we know to expect. If we know what's coming and start relying on that consistent occurrence, then we have less uncertainty and distress, which is what structure provides. Now, I recognize that being flexible might be one of those things that you value as a parent. I know that I do, but now is not the time to have that as your primary goal. You're going to need to be flexible when things don't work the way you plan them. So save that energy for those situations. So let's start the day off on the right foot with our morning schedule, or maybe better said, the morning structure, right? Before your quote unquote day starts. Brush your teeth, right? Take a shower. Now, you can be a little flexible on that. In fact, I tend to wait to take my shower. I do brush my teeth, but take my shower until after lunch, because if I do find myself with 30 minutes or so, I might go for a run if it's not snowing like it has last night, or I might do a bit of an exercise routine and then take my shower at lunch. Use that how you want. Put on non-loungy clothes, right? There's a lot of research to show that clothing impacts performance, and also how people interact with you is impacted. And I know when I'm wearing a shirt and a tie, even if I'm at home, my kids are a little bit more mindful about how they're interacting with me and if they're interrupting. The funny thing for me is shoes is a big deal, because when I'm relaxing, I don't have my shoes on. So even if I'm not in a suit and a tie or something like that during my workday, I will always put my shoes on, because that kind of clicks my brain over to that I'm actually doing something productive and work related. Get your coffee or tea or whatever you want to drink and look over the family day. Now, designated workspaces are important because that helps form a structure as well. It helps the brain switch into learning mode quicker for kids and work mode for adults. And so you want to have a space for your kids with all of their equipment, right? Paper. If you can have a binder with pocket holders that hold their pens, pencils, and then for the high schooler, I need to have graph paper because some of his more advanced math classes. Where will your workspace be? Will you have a specific room or will you not? Now, if you have real little ones, or older kids who need more guidance, then maybe having a room with a door isn't an option, or maybe your living space doesn't allow for it. But I would encourage you to differentiate a space in some way. Look for dividers, screens, stand-up screens. I've even seen people take shower curtains and hang them from the ceiling. As part of the family meeting, get a sense of what your kids would like so that they feel their space is their own. You don't want your kids to feel like you just put them somewhere out of the way or that their needs aren't recognized. Dining room and kitchen tables have become the new office spaces. Although we will talk about infants and toddlers, we'll explore many other areas, including the floor. If you have two adults working at home, then develop a plan for how to divide time to support children so that the other adults get time to work independently. This will be part of your family meeting discussion. And if you have teens, then you might be able to work them into aiding with the younger ones in order to get more time without interruptions. You may need to provide them with incentive, but hey, extra screen time or one less chore might be worth it to get what I call red zone time. So what is that, you ask? Well, as you see from this funny picture of an actual mom that's kind of all over the internet, she's using the old green, yellow, and red lights of the stoplight to show, when she can be interrupted. Now, the way that she has it defined on there is hilarious, but maybe doesn't give us as much information as we need. So that's going to transition us into our next slide and our discussion about zones. Okay. And so this is a concept by a journalist, a British journalist named Blair Palmer, who also does consulting for bigger corporations. And she's a stay-at-home mom. She does home study with her kid. And I like the way that she kind of thought about understanding her work and how it interacts with her kid's day. So we first have green time. And so green time is filled up with tasks that you can be distracted while you're doing. And I've thrown a few up there. Now, I recognize that all this might not be relevant to everybody. And in fact, reading for me, especially if it's more clinical or dry material, I have to have my focus kind of laser because I'm easily distracted that way. So, but this green time, I like to be in a shared space, not in my work area, because I can feel better saying no later when we get to some of the other zones. Or if you have a space with a door, then you can feel better about closing that door during the yellow and especially the red times, which I'll talk about here in a second. So I like this idea because you're not completely separated from your kids all day, because that's probably not going to work anyway if you have little ones, or if you don't have if you didn't build up that credit by having some available time that you can cash in from uninterrupted time. I like that notion of you're spending time with them and then you make the move to your workspace. Now, my workspace is in the middle of a common area. I do have a spare room, but I have two monitors I use, a nice work desk, and it's close to the router. So I chose to give up the ability to close a door. So during green times, I share space with my kids, except for my teenager, because he's suddenly developed a sudden violent allergy to adults that I want to be mindful of. And he's kind of stinky, so I'm actually okay with that. Currently, he works from his room, but my 11-year-old and 6-year-old are out in the main part of the house. Now, I live in a split level, so most of the work happens in the middle level. My 11-year-old often works downstairs in the den area, using the coffee table and the couch with all the supplies by the desk. And he's right next to the stairs, which I'm also next to at my computer desk, so he's in earshot. Now, my 6-year-old gets the dining room table that's very close to the workspace, and he's closer to mom and me. And so since that table's not far from the work desk, we can swap out for those times that we're not in the green area. So then let's move to the yellow. So now you may be in your workspace that you've defined, and you could be interrupted, but the idea is we're going to try to limit that, right? And so maybe this is during independent study time and class work for the older kids, because the idea is that you're working more focused, but could be interrupted if needed to answer questions. Now, I've gotten into the habit of during these times saying, give me 10 minutes to finish up. If my kid comes to me about questions about homework or if he needs assistance. And this allows me to get to a stopping point But more importantly, you're setting the tone and the structure again, right? You're reminding them what we're doing so that they understand the use of this zone concept. And the nice thing is that frequently he answers the questions himself within that 10-minute period of time. And then we're going into the red section. So hopefully this is when you're rewarded with undivided attention. Yeah, right. Because of the schedule that has been developed. You honored what you said you've done by being available during the green times. And so we're moving into hopefully doing things with no interruptions, either going into your room to close the door or not having anybody in your space during this time. And maybe this is for live classes for the middle to high schoolers if they're pretty self-focused, and downtime for all kids that are of all the school ages. And we're going to go into detail on some downtime activities here shortly. There will be, like I said, some tasks on here that may change colors, right? Or that may not be relevant to your situation. And there may be things on here that are not specific to you. But again, kind of think about what your work tasks are and your responsibilities and how that might plug into this idea. So successfully structuring your day comes with a lot of pre-planning, and part of that planning may include talking to your management. Now, we're in the 10th month of lockdown, so you all have probably spoken to your manager about what expectations are. And I know a lot of folks have been forced to go into the specifics of their situation as part of this evaluation process in January, right, for the year. If you haven't spoken to your manager about your challenges and find yourself in a precarious position evaluation-wise, then it's time for a heart-to-heart. Be careful to not let the stress of your situation cause your boss to misinterpret your approach as angry or aggressive. Speak to your desire to be productive while discussing the challenges at home in order to start the problem-solving process. I recognize that deviation from the usual 7.5 and 8-hour workday is as hard to find as a pearl in an oyster, but other options exist in other places. Now, it can be an uncomfortable conversation because we might be told no, but comparable to the sand that gets in the oyster, a little agitation may result in something rewarding. So, ask these questions, get comfortable with your discomfort, and have these conversations. Are split shifts available in which you work during the day and some in the evening? Could the conversation help you crystallize what is a priority so that you can you can focus that during your yellow and red times? Trick is not to go in guns a-blazing. Being thoughtful about your approach, recognizing that managers have their own stressors and requirements, and in the end, there's a job to be done, right? We got to keep that in mind. So this is often not an ideal working environment, but basically what can be done to get as much done until the kiddos are back to school, right? So, and look, if you've got run into previous communication problems with your manager, or if you're a manager who has run into communication problems with your staff, please give us a call at KEAP and we can kind of talk about different language and approaches to use and maybe put a different perspective on it to help improve that transaction. So when fleshing out your day, do yourself a favor. Print out a page with everybody's name at the top, 30-minute time blocks down the left-hand border, then go get it laminated at one of those office supply stores, right? You can put it in a centralized location, like maybe the fridge or something. And yes, this is mainly for you, for the adults, but it helps everyone be aware of what's going on throughout the day. Fill in your day stuff, especially the things that have already been scheduled or things that have been scheduled for you. Have the older kids fill in theirs, right? So that they're more aware and can think about their day. Maybe have the middle schooler do it too, or help him if he needs it. Get a red, yellow, and green marker so you can identify your zones, right? Meeting times, other arrangements that include interactions with other people, those are red or yellow. So maybe you could get those scheduled during independent study time and work completion for the middle and high schoolers. Assistance for middle schoolers struggling with self-direction, children with special needs, elementary kiddos are probably going to be green and yellow times, right? How about trying to match breaks and lunches with those kids that need more direct interaction while they're going through class? When you transition to yellow and red times, then have that visual reminder if someone doesn't look at the schedule, or for the little ones that aren't reading, a big colored dot on the back of your head, right? Or, you could get a shirt that's green and yellow and red, right? Get creative on this, but you have to have that identifier. And when I've got a couple of doors that close behind me, it doesn't completely close off the workspace because you can just go around the kitchen to the other side, but it's in the middle of the house, so I can post my colored dot there on the door and people know what's going on. Now, kids that aren't reading are going to need more image-based scheduling, and they're going to need to be reminded more frequently. I've got some real good links for printouts in the handout, which has the day broken down into morning and afternoon. And in addition, the downloads have little pictures for activities like doing homework and class time and brushing teeth, those types of things that you can print out, cut out, put a little Velcro on the back. And then when you move it from to do to done, underneath in the little square, it'll say things like awesome and great job. And, they're really good ways of using visuals for some of the younger kiddos. Now, remember, again, repetition is important, especially for the younger ones. So don't expect, the young kids to remember as much or be surprised that you're going over the system frequently. And let's be honest, the older kids need to be reminded as well, right? You have to be more patient with the younger ones to keep them on task because of difficulties with focus. And that brings us into, some common issues that derail our best laid plans, right? So there's been a lot of research to show that standing, some type of movement, helps some of the kids that are struggling with focus, especially during class, right? So there's a couple of good studies of, by standing, you're expelling energy. I mean, there really is a lot involved with coordination, standing upright, working against gravity. And that sometimes can help some kiddos. And what we do with the 6-year-old is just have a defined space. You can even tape it out on the floor if you've got a hardwood floor, stay within this particular space, but you can stand and move around if you need to, right? And that's actually a good definition for staying in front of your workspace and your computer that we're going to talk about here when we get to like a reward system. There's a thing called a balance disc, which is more, I think, seen in like yoga classes and other exercise classes, but this is basically a hard ball that is cut in half with a seat on the top, and you sit on the ball and try to keep yourself balanced. And this can be a good way for kids to sit and while they're keeping themselves balanced, also watching what's going on the screen. Now, obviously, this is something you want to do on the floor. Don't put it in a chair because you don't want them tumbling out of the chair and hurting themselves. But laptop maybe on the floor, Chromebook, and then sitting on the balance disc. Sensory items, fidgets, right? Do we all remember the fidget spinner craze? I remember we couldn't find those anywhere, and then all of a sudden they were everywhere because I guess that one died out. But we still have some floating around, and the 6-year-old maybe likes to spin that. You could do cheap options of balloons filled with dry beans or rice, Play-Doh if you have it around, those stress balls that we get from health fairs, or even old tennis or maybe better racket balls because they're smaller for littler hands. And if they're older, they're a little easier to squeeze, right? The trick is you need something that doesn't make a lot of noise during class or doing when other people are trying to work. So those dog toys with the whistles are out. Reward systems. So one idea is a behavioral dial. So if you have a spinner from an old board game, you can cut out a new face and we'll stick with the same theme of the green, yellow, and red, and then post that on the spinner. And then you can move the spinner. Green means they're doing everything they need to. Behavior's been good. Engagement's been good. Yellow means that they're maybe doing some things that aren't so great, being interrupting folks. Not doing their work. And then red is, we're in trouble, right? And we need to take some steps. Or you can do it in terms of sports, right? So if you're a soccer fan, you know that a yellow card means that you've done something inappropriate. That's a caution. If you get 2 yellow cards, you get a red one and you're dismissed from the field, and that may be kind of comparable to a timeout for your kiddo, removing them from the situation if that's possible, or from whatever it is that they're doing that they're enjoying, if they're being too rowdy. And then you could even look at it in terms of NASCAR as well, right? And the flags, right? And same thing with the yellow and the red. Yellow means there's something going on the track. You got to be careful. So it's caution again. Red means that there's really a problem. We need to stop, take a pause, see what's going on. And then, even the black flag in NASCAR means that, you've done something and you were kicked out. So sticker charts are great for the younger kids. You have a particular defined behavior you want to see them do. When they do it, they get a sticker on their chart. But when you get to a place where your kids are not putting things in their mouth anymore, then a token economy is really the way to go. It's more tangible. It's something that they have in their hands. These things can later be turned into activities or objects depending on what you prefer. And, those don't necessarily need to be costly objects either, right? You can do later bedtimes on the weekends, picking out what's for dinner, get ready for pancakes, which I'm okay with, or, which kid gets to pick the movie on movie night, right? So, guidelines for good reward systems, token economies, pick a behavior that your child is already doing well in addition to the challenging behaviors. That way you always have some time to be able to give them a reward and it's not all negative. Don't go overboard with long lists of things because that can be too overwhelming. Good ones related to NTI would be staying in front of your computer, as I mentioned, staying within that section that you sectioned off. And then have a appealing reward menu with a variety of items, and you can kind of have different, staying up late might be worth 1 token, choosing something from the dollar store or another store might be worth 10 or more, right? And some tips to keep in mind, or have your child have a place to hold their tokens, have a special jar or box. Kids like to shake things and look at them and count them. Use pennies, poker chips, marbles. We use Skittles actually for our 6-year-old. But you want to make sure that they can't get access to the particular tokens because they might get tricky and try to put it in themselves. So, and again, think of other ways that don't necessarily have to cost money, right? So that extra screen time might be something that you can work towards as well. Technology issues, are all the links that your kids need bookmarked? So all they have to do is click on them and go, right? Are your laptops charged? Are power cords handy if they're not? If you're using your dining room table and kitchen table for workspace, then can you have like a crate or a box to put everything in, set off to the side? I have to put my electric cords away. We have a new cat. He's less than a year old, and he has literally chewed through 10 different types of cords since we've got him, including the Christmas tree. So, if anybody's a Christmas Vacation fan, when the cat eats through the wire, somebody did this. I saw it online. It's pretty hilarious. I might try it next year. But have a crate where you can transition all that stuff to. It's on a centralized location, and then the next morning you pull it all out and you're ready to go. If you're using headphones, which are very, very important for like an audio divider, if you can't have a physical one, are they synced and charged and ready to go? What's your Wi-Fi situation like? A lot of Wi-Fi options, including AT&T, which is I have, they have apps where you can prioritize particular technologies. My laptop right now is prioritized because I'm doing the presentation, right? Can you get to the router and hardwire in if you're having problems with the Wi-Fi? Do you need a booster for the rest of the house, which then picks up the signal and sends it if you have multiple floors or a bigger house? For those of us that don't have internet at home, check your school's websites. A lot of schools are giving out their passwords for their Wi-Fi, and you can go to the parking lot and get work and check things from there. Now, doesn't sound like a great option, but it's still an option available to you, right? phone numbers from family members that are tech savvy. Maybe you have people that are really good with technology, and if you're in a red zone item and your kids are struggling, if you can't immediately go and help them out, maybe they can call a family member or a friend who's really good with technology to bail them out. Keep the phone numbers of the school ready to go. A lot of times they have help desks, or they will help you over the phone, or there is a way to submit basically a ticket like we do in state government to have some technology help. So look at what's on your school's website. A lot of times that's available too. And then technology cheat sheets, right? Most of the time we can keep kids logged in and have their passwords already memorized. But if you're concerned about security, then write it all down and keep it with the rest of your stuff, that you're keeping in that box or that crate. Have the email addresses for teachers ready to go so that you can send out messages if you have concerns about what's going on with your kids' grades. Okay, so that's a nice segue into the next topic. Every time I say that, I'm just basically patting myself on the back because I made this presentation, right? So we're segueing nicely into the next topic. And how you need to use technology to prepare and respond to issues with your kiddos' grades. So first, we're kind of looking at being proactive. And from my understanding, all the kiddos throughout the state are using Google Classroom, right? Get intimate with this resource if you already have it. Make sure that you can access it, because you can get into your kiddos' dashboard. You can see there's a to-do tile. You can see all of the things that they need to be doing, and really keep track, if need be, on what their requirements are for the week and for the day. And that's a good thing. And I check in with that periodically, but then may have to switch and check in with it more frequently if my kiddo is starting to struggle, right? Which kind of brings us to reactive. And that's where our Infinite Campus and Parent Portal comes into play. And this is part of your handout as well. So it's not something you have to do a screenshot of. You have access to it. It shows you how to download that app for your phone. If you do not have a smartphone, then you can just get it on your regular computer. But this shows all the grades. It shows if, things aren't turned in. And this is what we react to, right? And so I have a smartphone. I actually paid for it with my Living Well miles. That was, 2 years back. It's a third generation, so it was 2 behind the newest one. So it was fairly affordable. I got to use the miles on Amazon. And some people think iWatches are flashy and showy. I think mine's really, really helpful because I have the Parent Portal set up to actually give me notifications on my watch about my kids' grades. So that way I don't necessarily have to keep going into these things all the time. But if I see a possible problem coming up, then I know that I need to go and investigate a little bit more. Now, it's probably easy for you to help elementary school kids, but when you get into the upper grades of middle and then into high school, you might start feeling a little angry about the new math, right? And if you're not familiar with this picture on the screen, it's a dash from The Incredibles 2. If you've got kids, you've probably seen this several times. But doing some of this stuff, this higher end stuff, you start to recognize just how much of your grade school information has been lost to time. So look into tutors, right? Many schools are offering that. In fact, when we got back from break, the holiday break, we got an email. I'm in Jefferson County, about how tutors were available for the kiddos in grades 3 through 12. And now all school systems may not be doing that, but from my understanding is a lot of local libraries are providing online tutors as well. So there are resources out there to provide extra support for your kiddos. And then ask about turning stuff in late. Teachers are very flexible now with us trying to figure out NTI and being in this horrible situation. And so a lot of times they're allowing for stuff to be turned in late. There may be a penalty. Sometimes they're not, because they're recognizing how difficult it is for parents and folks to be able to do stuff like this. So downtime, those times that hopefully when your kids are done with their stuff, they've done their pre-approved independent work and study and homework, and now it's time for downtime. Some things available too are virtual story times. Reese Witherspoon and Jennifer Gardner started reading stories, um, famous stories online, and those have been archived. I think you can get them through YouTube, which is a good opportunity for stories for the kiddos. Mo Williams, who you see on here on the screen, he's the author and illustrator for Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus, which was a big hit in my household. He actually reads stories and walks you through how to draw some of his famous characters, which is pretty neat. You can find those online. I have the link for those in your handouts. What about a themed Zoom call? I really like this idea that I saw online. So if you have family members that may be grandparents that are retired or others that aren't working, but that are, we're doing this, via virtual Zoom or something like that, and you get those family members on the screen and they're reading your kiddo Give a Moose a Muffin. And then after the book's over, you're eating a muffin. And then after that, maybe you're drawing a muffin. There's lots of different ways where it's because, just the story in and of itself may be pretty quick, but how can we extend this by taking the theme of the story and turning it into a bunch of activities? Got to talk about screen time. I really, before COVID, definitely focused on the research. 4 hours or more, you see a real significant dip in study or in academics, but I've really had to loosen up on this. And one of the benefits I really see is that my kids get to hang out with their friends when they can't do it physically, right? They get online, they get their headsets on, and they can talk to their friends when they're hanging out. I've loosened these restrictions, especially if I have a lot of red zone items that I need to get to. Also, these are good end goals for those token economies that we discussed as well. Now, I know a lot of folks are worried about, some of the research that shows about, violence and aggression. And yes, that's something to be concerned about. But a lot of the research also suggests that the kiddos that are playing violent and immersive games by themselves tend to be at more risk because they don't have others to keep them grounded. So if you can keep your kids kind of in contact with either other kids online or their siblings or you being involved, that tends to take away some of the risk that we're seeing from these video games. Food questions are always big interrupters. I've included a link on how to develop self-help snack corners that you can do over the weekend that you can have your kids help with. Developing stuff for maybe a shelf in the fridge and stuff that don't need to be refrigerated so that kiddos can go and get food and don't have to come and ask you for it. I like this notion of busy boards and taking things from around the home. Here's a real good example, two real good examples, actually. I like this first one. Now these are going to be for your older kids, not the ones that are putting things in their mouth still, but this is basically just 2 blocks, leftover screws and nuts, a couple wrenches, and then we can work on our next mechanic, right? Or the one here on the right, which was a bunch of leftover stuff hanging around the house that they attached to a board, right? Some really great ideas out there. You just have to look for them, especially for the littler kids with the busy hands and stuff. Just make sure that you're making good choices about sharps and things like that. And then sensory bins, we feel like we've become dependent on technology and that's only the thing that kids want. That's the only thing kids want. But just because we feel that way doesn't mean that the younger ones are not going to be amused by the natural world, right? So, sensory bins, these plastic bins filled with rice or dried beans, you hide a bunch of things within them. I have a link on the handouts of like 20, 30 different ideas for these things. And they're great ways to keep kids active and busy and away from technology. Or strewn activities, which is what I refer to as like grabbing some pencil pouches, which you can get for $1 at Office Depot, or a 10-pack from Amazon for 16 bucks. and put different activities in them and then strew them around the house. So finding the activities themselves is an activity, right? So you could have one pouch that has a few crayons and something to color. You could have beads and a string and make a necklace. Or what I like, my 6-year-old really loves Legos. He's amazing. And so one of the things there is you can have a pack and you can print out instructions to make, which I have a link for, instructions to make kind of basic things like cats and dogs and the Legos that they need. And they could come up with and make those. And you can even get to something elaborate like Yoda or Minions, as you see here on the screen. And those links are in the handout. Embrace the mess when you can, right? So, and I know a lot of people that stresses them out, but again, we can't have a perfectly hermetically sealed environment. Use boxes. Embrace the mess. You know, we've coming off of Christmas. Hopefully we still got, I know I still have a lot of boxes floating around because I can't get them all into the recyclable thing. So, you know, we use these big boxes. Here's a great example of someone using a box, cutting out shapes and then having the shapes on the outside to put in the holes. You know, have a kid paint inside a box. That kind of helps manage the mess, right? And kids like to get into tight spaces anyway. If you're worried about, you know, getting the floors dirty, then get a drop cloth from one of the, you know, one of the hardware stores. Usually they're pretty cheap. Just use good judgment of what age of the kiddo you're using it with because of suffocation possibilities. But, you know, if they're not mobile, definitely don't use a drop cloth. Just make sure you tape it down, right? Or weigh it down, or get a tarp. You know, that's a better option anyway, because you can keep reusing it and not throwing it away, and they're heavier, right? You know, some ideas, and I've got a link of so many different ideas of what to do with a cardboard box. I mean, I think the actual link is 101 uses for a cardboard box. So, you know, feel free to look into that. And then we have ideas about getting washable paint and markers, having your kids maybe paint the toy cars or other plastic particular toys, and then afterwards giving them a bath. Right. And so if you feel comfortable having your kid in the bath or having them near a bin of water, then they can paint the toys and then they can wash the toys. If you have food that's going bad or liquids that are going bad, instead of throwing them away, you know, we like to give our 6-year-old those things in a big bowl and he can start making his mad scientist concoctions. Yeah, it's nightmare fuel and you're going to have to hold back your gag reflex, but my 6-year-old really gets into it and kind of throws his head back and does the mwah ha 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 ha. So, you know, that's again, try to embrace the mess when you can. I know that might be anxiety provoking for a lot of folks, but we're not being perfect, right? And, you know, thinking about agitation and the things that we have to deal with brings us into this notion of self-care and making sure that we're using our diaphragm for breathing, which is a muscle below the lungs, and taking those deep breaths when we find ourselves agitated. And I like the idea of this box breathing and conceptualizing it this way. And what we mean by box breathing is that you got your top level of the box is you inhale for 5 seconds. Then you hold for 5 seconds. And then you exhale for 5 seconds. And then you hold again for 5 seconds before you inhale. And this allows us to get a real good balance between the oxygen that we're bringing in and the carbon dioxide that we're taking out. When those particular things get off whack, it has an impact on the neurochemistry in our brain. A lot of people feel lightheaded, panic attacks, things like that. But this type of breathing and slowing it down and breathing from the abdomen. So when we breathe in, we want to make sure that our abdomen extends. We put our hand on our belly button. That hand is going to move out. And we know that we're getting our diaphragm engaged. It helps us decrease our heart rate. It decreases our blood pressure. It helps us improve our focus because of the amount of oxygen that we're getting. And then finally, too, we're seeing a lot of people that have issues with their breathing or fast, what we call fight or flight breathing, where we're breathing high and from the chest, which is not the good breathing. That's not the relaxed breathing. Then we're also seeing pain in the neck and the shoulders and the jaw, because as we breathe fast and shallow, our head kind of juts out like a turtle. And those cords that you see on your neck when you see yourself straining, all of those are being overworked. You know, they say that for each inch your head moves forward, it gains 10 pounds of weight. Think about the amount of stress that's putting on that area. Okay. So babies and toddlers, very complicated working at home, you know, and thinking about red times and how we're going to manage kiddos who really aren't into having a reasonable, rational conversation, right? You know, we hopefully will be working from our, you know, our seats if we can. You know, remember those boxes again, how wonderful those are. I like this idea of containing our toddler in their own little world with the sides, and maybe we can be at our work desk while this box is right next to us. You know, play pens and pack and plays are, you know, amazing during this time. Or maybe we need to stand if our kid gets fussy, right? I love the use of the baby Bjorn here in the picture. But they're good to keep the baby close, you know, hopefully be able to keep them soothed as you're maybe possibly rocking back and forth while you're working at your computer, right? Just make sure that you have those straps that go across your back at the right spot. I used to have mine too high when I had little ones. That would play some havoc on my lower spine. This is one of those situations where you really do need to follow the directions, right? Or you may find yourself needing to be on the floor. And if you're in a physical, you know, if you're physically capable of doing that, that sometimes can be very helpful. You know, having a yoga mat or a blanket, again, not too thick. We want to watch out for suffocation. To be able to sit on the floor. How do we position ourselves? Standing desk risers that we can then maybe transition to our work when we go back to work. You know, there's one called a flex spot that's $100. We could use that on the floor, and then when we get back to our offices when COVID's over, then we can use that as a standing desk. Now, if you want a cheaper option, you can go to Amazon, type in floor desk, and see some options for about $40. So if you are physically capable of getting on the floor, there can be a lot of benefits to working on your flexibility and your core. And I've seen a lot of YouTube videos that kind of walk you through how to, you know, work on that and stretch while you're sitting with your infant, rubbing them on the back, you know, hopefully getting in some nap time. And then how do we track what our kiddos are doing, right? The baby tracker for the iPhone and Android, I have that link within your resource section. You know, what we want to do is focus on nap time so that maybe we can hopefully predict when to maybe work in our red zone times or more times that we need to focus. We have the feeding schedule time, so we know how to work that into our schedule. And then also we're tracking how long can there be independent play, right? And that will help us as well. So in addition to the baby tracker for iPhone and Android in your handout, there's also a baby center free download of just a page that you can track if you don't have the technology available. And then finally, to wrap up, self-care, right? And I kind of love this list of things they have on here. You know, we have to, with the constant monitoring, the keeping kids on task, calling them out for, well, being kids, we have to allocate time for relaxation. We have to highlight a relationship. It's not a power struggle. You know, be deliberate about spending quality time that's not combative. Play some board games. If you're not feeling too guilty about screen time, then play a video game with them and let them destroy you, right? Because they're probably going to be better than you anyway. However, I recently downloaded Tetris, and it's a real pleasure to watch them panic as I crush them. You know, have a laugh about it if they beat you. You know, one thing we use in play therapy is called non-directive play, in which you sit with your child and let them choose what to do. And this can be very difficult because a lot of times even parents are giving positive direction, but it's still direction. And in this situation, we don't want to direct them. So if they're putting Legos together saying, hey, you should put that Lego there. No. We want to allow them to actually take the reins. so that we can change that dynamic about the parent always being on the kid all the time. And this is difficult to do, and often a psychologist or counselor that's trained in this can be helpful to direct you on the non-direct play. Exercise is important, right? Including the breathing that we're doing while we're exercising. Make sure that, and I have a link of things that you can use around the house, your own body weight, objects like milk cartons, in order to exercise, and try to get the kids involved during their downtime as well, right? My kids do some running stuff when they're in school, so maybe we'll go for a jog. I have a heavy bag in the garage, so we'll go out and punch on that. It's good exercise. And then we have to get some sleep, right? We have to prioritize that, not just for ourselves, but also for our kids. And a routine just similar to what we talked about in the morning is vital for the evening as well. And try to make sure that you're staying away from that screen time at least an hour before bed, because it messes with the melatonin and all the neurochemistry that gets us to sleep. So if you don't have internet access, if you're going to parking lots, if you're working a second job, if you're struggling to manage your kids' behavior because they're acting out, if you're struggling to communicate with management, or if all of these things are happening, give us a call at KEAP, right? We can help you try to get in touch with a therapist, or we can give you some ideas. We can be a sounding board. We want to be able to help you develop a plan, or at least have someone to vent to. But I'm hoping that any type of conversation will result in a resource that you can take forward in helping to address the situation, or at least feel like you've got support as you go through this. And eventually, we're going to get back to work, y'all, so we can get away from that. So this is the contact information for me and for the number at KEAP. You don't have to necessarily call and ask for me. Any of my coworkers are more than capable of having conversations about how to manage your stress, because that's what we do at KEAP. Talk about the balance of work and personal life, how they intersect, and boy, are they intersecting now, right? Okay. So what we also tried to do is, a traditional phone call, but also provide a third-party platform for virtual appointments so that we can see you face-to-face. There's a lot of benefit with connecting with people, seeing their face, especially, when we're isolated at home. So that's another option that you can request as well. Just send me an email and I'll be happy to schedule something like that for you to talk about specific needs or how to apply some of this stuff to your own personal situation. So with that, I'm going to stop. I know we're about 4 minutes over. Any questions that anybody has? I saw somebody made a mention of good ideas within the chat. I love that. A room full of people is going to be a lot smarter than me. So any questions anybody has, feel free to go ahead and type them in the chat box. If not, and you need to get moving, thank you all for the work that you're doing. Give yourself that grace and have a good rest of your week. Thank you all for the great feedback. Yeah, Michael, and that's probably an even more quicker way, instead of going to the website and looking for the help desk and all that stuff, just to call the school, the family resource office, and find out what they have available as far as the tutors and the tech help and all that stuff. Well, it's great, Renee, and that's an amazing thing to do.